So we are horrified by these acts of violence against transgender people. We grieve for the loss of their precious lives. We grieve for their families, for their loved ones, for their communities. But what do we do with all of our anger and our pain? So Lisa and I thought we would put together a service that would give you many things to think about and then some options for how we can participate as a congregation in better educating ourselves, better creating welcoming space, and engaging in activism. I want to start with a quick primer because I don't want to assume that we all know what these words mean. So let's just start with, what does transgender mean? I've taken definitions from the Human Rights Campaign, and they use transgender, saying it's an umbrella term for people whose gender identity or expression is different from the cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. A sex that usually is assigned based on external genitalia. As in our crayons, a crayon that was labeled red when it really felt blue inside. So as these children grow and develop, they might feel they are a male even though they were assigned female at birth. Someone who identifies as female even though they were assigned male at birth. There's also the term non-binary, which is an adjective describing a person who does not identify exclusively as man or woman. They may identify as being both man and woman, somewhere in between, or as falling completely outside of those categories, because categories just limit us. So for non-binary folks, they may identify as transgender, but some don't. And some refer to themselves as agender, genderqueer, gender fluid, and probably also other names that I don't even know. So do I expect you to remember all of this? Yes and no. I don't expect you to remember it in this moment. But what I'm hoping we can expect of ourselves is that we will be curious and we will learn more as opportunities become available to us, which are actually knocking at our door. And why it matters is because our people, are literally losing their lives because of gender expression. The least we can do is understand the issues that transgender people, our community, grapple with. And another ask of by me this morning is that we move beyond our lack of understanding and we move beyond tolerance to open arms. I hadn't thought much about what the word tolerance really means. It sounds friendly. It sounds warm. Hey, be who you are. It almost sounds inviting. But then I ran into what interfaith writer Diana Eck from Bozeman explains about all the limitations of tolerance. She's an interfaith work, but I think this concept, which really changed my thinking, can be applied to anything. So Diana Eck says, tolerance is a deceptive virtue. I don't wish to belittle tolerance, but simply to recognize that it's not a real response to challenging the facts of difference. Tolerance can enable us to coexist, but it certainly in no way has us be good neighbors. In fact, tolerance can often stand in the way of engagement. If I tolerate, and she uses the example of Muslim, if I tolerate my Muslim neighbor, I am not therefore required to understand them. Tolerance does not take a spar with the ideas that challenge our own. For a majority of people, tolerance is simply another expression of privilege. I felt like I got kicked in the stomach when I read this. I was like, whoa. She also pointed me to the work of philosopher Elizabeth Spellman, who writes about tolerance. If one is in the position to allow someone else to do something, one is in a position to keep that person from doing it. To tolerate your speaking is to refrain from exercising the power that I have to keep you from speaking. And of course, I don't have to listen to what you have to say. Tolerance is easy if those who are asked to express it don't need to change a whit. That is a really different way of seeing it. And I think we'll all be pondering this through the week. So what moves us from just tolerance, which of course is better than hatefulness, but it doesn't get us where we need to go. But what moves us from there to wishing what is best for the other person. It's compassion, it's knowledge, it's respecting all of their human worth and dignity. So here at UUFB, I want us to celebrate all of our LGBTQ community members and all of our community members beyond this door. I want us to know how to create safety and to be radically welcoming. I want us to invite inclusion, and I know sometimes we don't know how. So Lisa Baker is about to step up and talk with you about how we can start that process of making it happen through embracing welcoming renewal. So I'm very excited to have Lisa finish our sermon.
This tag team sermon. So what I'm going to talk a little about welcoming congregation and welcome renewal and sort of the nuts and bolts, but then I'm also going to try to expand our vision of welcome and talk about what welcome could mean in our community. The Unitarian Universalist Association launched the Welcoming Congregation program in 1990, quote, to help us learn how to undo homophobia in our communities, in ourselves. This fellowship chose to become a welcoming congregation in 1998, exactly 25 years ago this year. I'll suggest that many things have changed in that last quarter century, including our use of terms like homophobia. We don't say that now, right? We have a different vision, a bigger vision. How far have we come in developing our understanding and practice of welcome as a welcoming congregation over those 25 years? What do we have to learn still about how to understand and embrace the full expanse of gender identities, as Margo was just talking about? Trans, queer, genderqueer, non-binary, intersex, asexual, pansexual. Do we really know how to speak about sexuality and gender? Do we stay up to date as these ideas change so quickly in our culture and among the people, the members of those communities who keep teaching us? How do we guide our children and youth in healthy identity formation? How does an individual's nationality or ethnicity or race impact identity? Who among us may be living with HIV/AIDS? How can we most effectively organize against anti-LGBTQ legislation? Not that that's something that we have to confront in Montana. Welcoming congregation was intended to be a living process of ongoing education and practice. But like many UU congregations, UUFB currently has no intentional practice to support our commitment to welcome. In 2015, UUA unveiled the Welcome Renewal program. Ita, who's here with us today, Ita Colleen may have been the first in this community, even 5 years ago, to formally propose that UUFB enter into Welcome Renewal. But we've not yet made that commitment. So that's what we are bringing to you again today. Personally, I became inspired about Welcome Renewal after participating in the Trans Inclusion webinar series that was led by Kitty Donich, who's running our live stream today, but should actually be out here with me, and Ita. They led that program for a group of us last fall and had led it previously. In the past few months, Welcome Renewal has been formally discussed in the Social Justice Action Committee, in the Sunday Services Committee, and in the board, all of whom have endorsed this congregation's participation in Welcome Renewal. And in January, the question will come to you as members of UUFB. At our annual meeting in January, you'll have the opportunity to vote on whether our community should undertake Welcome Renewal beginning in calendar year 2024. So what will this entail? Welcome Renewal consists of 5 practices to be implemented in each 12-month period. On the back of the responsive reading, that handout, you have, this is laid out, these 5 practices. You may have heard at times in the past several years that Welcome Renewal is very complicated and rather difficult and onerous to implement, but I want to assure you that the process isn't, and also that the process itself was simplified, so it has become less of a bureaucratic problem. And actually, we are already practicing most of the components already this year. In 2023, we would have met most of these if we had been formally engaged, in large part because of everything that Reverend Margo has been bringing to us this year. Practice 1 is to become a welcoming congregation. So this one is one and done. We've already done this, and we'll never have to check that box again. Practice 2 is welcoming worship services. The commitment would be to plan at least 2 worship services each year that uplift themes of LGBTQ+, welcome and inclusion. So again, if we had been formally enrolled in the program in 23, this service would have qualified. Also, the service last spring where Reverend Margo spoke about transgender issues would have qualified. So it's not that hard. Practice 3 is welcoming days of observance. UUA designates 12 days of observance, including the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and at least 6 of them must be recognized and celebrated by the congregation. This is actually, again, through Reverend Margo's efforts, this has already been happening in the newsletter this year, but you may hear more of these days recognized out loud in services as appropriate. Practice 4, which did not happen this year, is welcoming religious education. And this refers here to adult religious ed. The requirement is that at least 1 webinar, movie, or other event, doesn't have to be long, could be an hour, is offered each year to the community, to the congregation, with the goal that at least 10% of the congregation participates. Practice 5 is to support a welcoming project. And this means financial support. So at least once a year, the congregation will make a meaningful financial contribution to an LGBTQ organization or campaign. Last month, our second Sunday offering was given to the MSU Queer Straight Alliance, so that would have qualified. So why are these practices important? Kitty, my partner in this Welcome Renewal effort this year, came home from General Assembly quoting at every moment, at every opportunity, the words of Jill Novensky of the Community Church of New York, who challenged those at GA this year. Who is welcome in your congregation? How do they know? What Welcome Renewal as a practice does is to communicate with intention who we welcome. UUFB will need to certify to UUA every year that we have fulfilled all 5 practices. So this will be an ongoing commitment as long as we continue to follow it, to engage in it, which is good, right? Because it keeps us focused, it keeps us doing this. So in a bigger scheme here, whenever I talk about Welcome Renewal this year, I'm always conscious that the program continues to be focused on welcoming our LGBTQ neighbors. However, I cannot help but believe and hope that the spirit and practice of welcome will extend to other marginalized groups as Welcome Renewal is implemented here. In that spirit, I'd like to invite us, each of us, to open up our perspective and begin to imagine what a more expansive sense of welcome might look and feel like. And I want to suggest to you that welcome is not only about the outsiders we may hope to welcome in. Welcome is something that each of us yearns for. As Tanya so movingly spoke about today, we each want that feeling that this is where we come home, right? As I talk about this, I'm going to draw on the words of Alex Capitan, who is a queer and genderqueer spiritual activist and was one of the creators of the Trans Inclusion webinar series. Alex invites us to engage in the following exercise. I'd like each of you to look inward for a moment. So find a comfortable position. Feel the floor. Feel the chair you are in. Close your eyes if you like. Breathe deeply. Think of a time when you felt in your life a profound sense of welcome. We're going to take a few moments to really remember and feel that experience in your own life, a time when you could say that you felt a profound sense of welcome. Hold that experience in your mind and consider what it felt like in your body to experience that welcome. What effect did it have on you? If this was a stretch, if you couldn't quite even arrive, imagine what that would feel like. What is it that you yearn for? And now imagine what it would be like to feel that way, that full and total welcome, that belonging, every time you entered this space. This fellowship has a lot to offer in terms of welcome. In the surveys and focus groups that have surrounded our ministerial search this year, we are often described as welcoming. We note all the ways that we welcome and have felt welcomed. When I did this exercise myself last fall in the Trans Inclusion group, what I shared with the group was I sensed that sense of welcome here. When I entered this space, I felt like I came home. I was welcomed over and over again. I'm still welcomed. Every time I come, I feel I'm welcomed by many, individuals. Every time I come in, We have a lot to offer in the way that we welcome. I'm also going to suggest that I'm conscious that I am probably easy to welcome. I am middle-aged, I am white, well-educated, progressive, cisgender, straight. I fit an easy mold, right? When we say among ourselves that we are welcoming, and rightly so, by definition, though, we are speaking to the people who have stayed. What about the people who didn't stay? What did they feel here? Alex Capitan writes, again, he writes, imagine what it would be like to feel that full and total welcome every time you entered this space. Alex says, when I think about beloved community, this is what I think about and long for, a community of radical welcome, where each person affirms the peace of the divine that lives in themselves and in every other being, where we can hold each other in all of our messiness and all of our brokenness, where love and compassion reign supreme, where each of us fully, completely belongs. Now, Alex used there, and Margo used earlier, the term radical welcome. What does radical welcome look like? For the final piece of our shared sermon today, I'm going to draw on the work of Stephanie Spellers, who is a Black female Episcopal priest and can be credited with creating this concept of radical welcome quite a while ago. Reverend Spellers says, think of welcome as a progression. At the first level of welcome, a congregation practices invitation. The congregation says, come, join our community and share our cultural values and our heritage. The goal is assimilation. New people should adopt the dominant identity. We will have systems in place to invite and incorporate newcomers into our existing structures. I can feel Kitty back there in the video room knowing what I'm going to say next, because Kitty always says, we say, join our committees. We did this recently, right? We invite in, but we remain overwhelmingly monocultural. And when you think about culture, the way that I just used the term, think about the way we do things. We expect services to begin on time and last no more than 1 hour. Oh dear, I see the time here. We strive to run our committee meetings. We strive to run them efficiently and adhere to agendas. During the trans inclusion series last fall, as we talked over and over about culture in this sense of culture, I started referring to myself as dominant culture girl. My companions will remember that, because I began to recognize how I endorse and reflect the values, the language, the behavior of the white majority, the dominant culture in this country, right? Can you imagine there are groups of people who might find those kinds of practices off-putting, a little cold, unwelcoming even? So again, the first level of welcome was inviting. At the second level of welcome, a congregation practices inclusion. The congregation says, help us to be diverse. The goal is incorporation. Members of marginalized groups are welcomed and incorporated, but there is no true shift in culture or practice. And the result is actually often a revolving door. People come in from the margins only to stay on the fringe or leave. We remain monocultural, with perhaps some pockets of difference. The third and highest level of welcome is radical welcome. Here the congregation says, bring your culture, your voice, your whole self. We want to engage with you in a truly mutual relationship. We say, what inspires you? How can we support you? What can we co-create with you? We want to be changed by you. The goal is incarnation. The community embodies and expresses the full range of voices and gifts present, including those of the other. Different groups share power and shape identity, mission, worship, and ministries together. The culture changes. The community is transformed. So I offer to you, as we commit to welcome renewal, let us seek to be transformed.